This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 36. I'm your host, Steve at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network. So, welcome back once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, for today's show, we're going to be previewing all the NFL matchups for the action of week 11. Going to review the teams on bye, go through every matchup, all the startable players, using my trust, if you must and bust system, and of course, answer some listener start sit questions. Going to start with mentioning the teams on bye. Got the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Miami Dolphins, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, by my count, in typical deeper super flex leagues, that'll give at least 17 typical starters who we will not be able to have at our disposal for this week. So, definitely a lot of firepower that we're going to be missing, a lot of significant talent, but they need a week off. So, it is what it is. We are going to actually start with the listener start sit questions. We actually did get a decent amount, so I just want to plow through those before going into the specific matchups. And then that way, going through the listener start sit questions, that may make the matchup previews a little bit more understandable based on my thoughts on the specifics of what the listeners were asking about. So every Wednesday, I put out the tweet asking about if there's any start sit questions, anything I can help you with, or just general strategy questions. There's a couple of those, so I love to see those as well. So we're going to go through those. Oh yeah, so every Wednesday, I make a tweet asking for that, and appreciate everyone reaching out. Uh, Glad that I can help you, through these decisions, but ultimately. You'll be the one who's pressing submit. So I will just kind of dispense how I approach these situations. And then ultimately it will be up to you. But hopefully I can, help you clarify some of the issues that you're having this week. So going to start, of course, with at Jamie underscore FF Addict 2. He's asking to pick two in a half PPR league. He lists Tyler Boyd, Donovan Peoples Jones, Elijah Mitchell, and Kadarius Toney. Tyler Boyd going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Donovan Peoples Jones against the Buffalo Bills, Elijah Mitchell against the Arizona Cardinals, and Kadarius Toney against the Los Angeles Chargers. For me, the instant start here is Tyler Boyd going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He will be lineup chalk for me until Jamar Chase returns to the field. And then even at that point, he might still be pretty solid as a flex play. As far as Donovan Peoples-Jones go, he has been coming on quite well here the last few weeks, but this game is going to be in Buffalo, and they are estimating to get just a ton of snow. Could be multiple feet of snow as well. So, snow thanks as far as the wide receiver in that game is concerned. Bad joke. I apologize, although you may have to hear it again at some point during this show. So, no Donovan Peoples-Jones for me. An interesting one here between Elijah Mitchell and Kadarius Toney. Elijah Mitchell is recently back from his time on IR, had 18 carries in the Sunday night game against the Chargers last week. So you really love that usage, even with Christian McCaffrey there, and it's against Arizona. So another really nice spot for him to get a decent amount of touches. Kadarius Toney is also an interesting option here, especially if Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling are not able to suit up, as they are both questionable at this point. Elijah Mitchell plays on Monday night, and Kadarius Toney plays on Sunday night. So that actually gives you, Jamie, some pretty good time to make that call between the two. So I would take as much time as you possibly can, and then make that decision then. Uh, really like both options, like Tony better if Juju happens to be inactive. But overall, I like Elijah Mitchell in the matchup against Arizona simply because of his level of usage against the Chargers. So that's the way I would go. Good luck to you, good sir. At OL Steven asks in a PPR, Donta Foreman against the Baltimore Ravens, Christian Watson against the Tennessee Titans, or DeAndre Swift against the New York Giants. Christian Watson, of course, coming off of the monster game against the Cowboys, really kind of an unprecedented output based on what he has shown so far in his rookie season. Of course, without Romeo Dubes there, he does have more opportunity. Not sure if I can expect that level of an output this week. My instinct between the three was to go with DeAndre Swift, just because he is just, as far as I'm concerned, just the best player of the bunch here. However, as he's kind of coming back from some injuries, he has not been playing as much as we would like. It is very much a split backfield with Jamal Williams in a tough matchup against the Giants. Um, so I can basically eliminate Swift. I am going to be going with Donta Foreman here for you, uh, OL Steven, against the Ravens. So don't love that matchup, but he just has been getting a impressive amount of volume, especially if Chuba Hubbard is not at full strength yet. Really like Foreman just from a pure volume standpoint. So good luck to you, good sir. Next one comes from at underscore Alix underscore. He has another Tony question. So Kadarius Tony at or against the Chargers, or Alan Lazard against the Tennessee Titans, playing on Thursday night. So in this one, I'm going with Alan Lazard, just a little bit more of a steady option. If it's looking like you might need a little bit of ceiling in this matchup, like if you're kind of decimated by bye weeks and you really want to try to aim for that higher ceiling, then I would go for Kadarius Tony. But in general, I think Alan Lazard just presents a much more steady baseline of output. So I would be going with Lazard. If I had to decide for tomorrow night, I would lean Lazard. So best of luck. At Chimichanga44, he asked to pick 3.5 PPR. He's asking regarding Michael Carter, running back for the Jets against the New England Patriots, Devin Singletary against the Cleveland Browns, once again in the Buffalo, most likely heavy snow game, David Montgomery against the Atlanta Falcons, Josh Palmer against the Kansas City Chiefs, Garrett Wilson against the New England Patriots as well, and Allen Robinson against the Saints. The three I'm going with here are David Montgomery, Garrett Wilson, and Joshua Palmer. Going Joshua Palmer if there's no Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. The backup option for me would be Allen Robinson. Now, the problem with that is that Joshua Palmer plays on the Sunday night game, and the LA Rams play at 1 p.m. So hopefully throughout the week, we get a little bit more information regarding Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. If both of them are out, I think I would feel the most confident with Joshua Palmer, even with Allen Robinson in line to maybe get some more volume with Cooper Cup, unfortunately, on IR. But if Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are looking to be active, I would shift to Allen Robinson, making the trio Allen Robinson, Garrett Wilson, and David Montgomery. David Montgomery really loved the matchup against Atlanta, especially with Khalil Herbert also on IR. It's one of those weeks where a lot of guys went down, unfortunately. So do like David Montgomery from a volume standpoint in a juicy matchup. So good luck to you, good sir. At Triathlete Chef Fiesca DST question. Love those. Asking about the Denver Broncos or the Bengals defense. The Broncos are going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, and then the Bengals are going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The scoring system here is it hurts you for points against and total yards against. I'm still going to be sticking with the more solid defensive unit in the Broncos against the Raiders. The Broncos are at home, if that matters to you. Bengals are on the road in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh definitely has a lot of turnover potential just with Kenny Pickett there. But overall, I think the Raiders are just a little bit easier to scheme for with the talent on that defensive unit. If you can maintain Devontae Adams and try to keep Josh Jacobs at bay, a little bit easier to game plan against compared to the plethora of weapons in the Pittsburgh offense, just with kind of the downgrade at the quarterback position, just at this point of Kenny Pickett's career. So I would be going with the Broncos there. Then he asks a strategy question: drop or hold Eno Benjamin, who actually was surprisingly cut by the Cardinals early in the week, and then was claimed by the Houston Texans. So he's still somewhat fantasy relevant, fantasy viable here. Drop or hold Eno, or pick up Hollywood Brown, Marquise Brown, or J.K. Dobbins. I will, as soon as you hear this, triathlete chef, I would be dropping Eno Benjamin for Marquise Brown as quickly as possible. Um, if he gets scooped up, I would absolutely prefer J.K. Dobbins over Eno Benjamin at this point as well. Just much better um, lottery tickets as they're coming back from injuries. Both of them are currently on IR. I would rather have them to hold on to. You're really not going to be wanting to start Eno Benjamin anytime soon as he's getting acclimated to this new offense, even in what could be a limited role in the first place. So, best of luck to you, good sir. Another, Benjamin question comes from at Gold Jacket QB. So my guy Jim, he actually gave me my first opportunity on a podcast. So appreciate you, Jim, always for that. But he asked a very good question here. Do you see Benjamin recently on the Houston Texans as a bad thing for Damian Pierce volume wise? So I love this question. I'm going to say potentially, but not for a couple of weeks. At least. So Damian Pierce is getting a very hefty amount of volume in what I was thinking was going to be a very bad offense, which a lot of volume, good, bad offense, bad. So I would figure that someone like a Rex Burkhead, who's a pass catcher and type of a running back in that offense, would be getting a little bit more work than typical, just because if they're playing from behind, blah blah blah. That kind of a thing can typically occur, really hasn't happened consistently. So, Benjamin, is he really any better than Rex Burkhead? I really question that. I really don't think so. So is that going to affect Damian Pierce? I don't think so, at least not right away. It will be a very fascinating situation to see play out. I'm very curious because Benjamin has had played very well for the Cardinals when he was given the volume in James Conner's absence. So that whole um, decision to release him was a little bit interesting to me. Uh, didn't really know why, or like why not just hold on to him, but like it's not like he's like costing like the team a lot of money. He just really isn't. So very much a bizarre move there, but I don't see it as a bad thing for Damian Pierce, at least for the next 2 or 3 weeks. But very curious to see what happens there. Again, just have my doubts if it's a bad thing just based on the inconsistent usage of Rex Burkhead, because they're just still feeding Pierce either way. So be very interesting to see what happens there. At Pipomatic asks a two-part question. In a PPR league, he wants to pick five. He rattles off seven options here. And then he has a tight end question. So we'll start actually with the tight end question. Tyler Conklin or Greg Dulcich. Dulcich, tight end for the Broncos, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders, or Tyler Conklin, tight end for the Jets, going up against the New England Patriots. Going to go with Greg Dulcich here. The Raiders' defense is very bad. Obviously, the Broncos' offense has not been great, but with Jerry Judy a little bit banged up, I think that does up the opportunity a bit for Dulcich. Conklin has been decently solid as a streamable tight end, but against New England, don't really love that um, matchup there for the Jets. I'll take Dulcich here. And then he also asks, or add Taysom Hill with a top priority of waivers. I would say do not use the top priority waiver on Taysom Hill. He would be kind of fine to add, generally speaking, but not as a top waiver priority. Just kind of a guy to keep your eye on. I wouldn't be in any rush to scoop up Taysom at this point. So Greg Dulcich for me, don't scoop up Taysom. But Conklin is not a bad option either if Dulcich does happen to get scooped up. So pick five PPR. He rattles off Damian Pierce against the Washington Commanders, Saquon Barkley against the Detroit Lions, Ramondre Stevenson against the Jets, Cordero Patterson against the Bears, DeAndre Hopkins against the 49ers, Terry McLaurin against the Houston Texans, and Gabe Davis against the Cleveland Browns. Once again, for Gabe Davis, same logic as with Donovan Peoples Jones from the earlier question. Snow thanks. Uh, in this case, I'm going to be choosing Damian Pierce, Saquon Barkley, Ramondre Stevenson, DeAndre Hopkins, and Terry McLaurin. I think those 5 give you the best, combination of safety and ceiling. Cordero Patterson is a really tough one to bench. It's just especially against the Bears, it's a really nice matchup, but there is just kind of a gross committee of running back usage there in Atlanta. They are running the ball a ton, which is awesome. It's just Tyler Algier is getting work, Avery Williams is getting work, like whoever that is, he's getting touches, and Caleb Huntley is still getting touches. So I think maybe I'm like a little bit shook from that last Thursday game against the Panthers where Patterson was really in like a smash spot and the Falcons just did not utilize him the way I thought would have been appropriate, especially considering how much work he got in the previous week. It's just Dameon Pierce, Saquon, and Ramondre have just been so solid, volume wise and in their production. Hard to say no to them. Again, Gabe Davis with the snow. Not really interested in any pass catchers. Generally speaking, in that game, you may have to. I mean, you may just have to play like Stephon Diggs, and that kind of thing. So I understand it, but if there's that much snow, I don't know, makes me nervous. So DeAndre Hopkins and then Terry McLaurin, just really solid wide receiver options there. So best of luck to you, good sir. Thanks again, everyone, for asking the start sit questions. Really hope I can help you out with those decisions. A lot of good questions, a lot of really smart players to be debating between. So really love the quality of the questions there. Hope I can help you. Okay. Starting the week off, Thursday night football. We're going to go through the primetime games, the 1 p.m. games, and then the 4 p.m. games. Okay. So, primetime games starting with Thursday night football. Got the Tennessee Titans at the Green Bay Packers. Um, I always like the Packers a little bit better at home. Uh, really love Aaron Jones here. Aaron Rodgers to me is a super flex play. Then as far as the wide receivers go, as I mentioned in some of the start sit questions, I think Alan Lazard is like a trustworthy flex type of an option. More in like a deeper league. If there's multiple flex options, I typically would not advise starting a player in the flex on a Thursday night matchup. But I do like Alan Lazard a bit. Christian Watson's definitely a good guy to have on your roster. Am I ready to fire him up in a starting lineup? I'm really not just yet. I want to see a little bit more from him just because the usage, even with Romeo Dubes' absence here in the last couple of weeks, just has not been that great. So if this is just an opportunity for him to get more clear cut opportunities in the offense, well, that would be fantastic. I'm not super ready to get him into my lineup. So he's more of a deeper league, if you must option where Aaron Jones is a trust and Alan Lazard is a trust too, if you must. And then Aaron Rodgers, of course, would be like a super flex play against the Titans. On the Tennessee side of the ball, really mostly supremely interested in Derrick Henry. Outside of Derrick Henry, if Ryan Tannehill is starting, he is a borderline super flex option for me. Beyond that, there's really no one else on this team that I would be remotely interested or confident starting in a fantasy matchup. Just really looking forward to Traylon Burks being back in the offense full time. Other than that, don't really love a lot of the offensive pieces, but they're a good team. But outside of Derrick Henry, don't really want to trust anybody at this point. Sunday night football, we have the Kansas City Chiefs at the LA Chargers. The Chargers side of the ball, you can still trust Austin Eckler, of course, Justin Herbert. Um, As far as the pass catchers go, really gonna have to be monitoring the practices. If Keenan Allen is healthy, if Mike Williams is healthy, it's gonna be really hard for me to not get them into my lineups. So they would be kind of a trust if you must level. I think some expectations can be minimized just because they're kind of working their way back from injuries and stuff. So that's kind of a tricky situation. Either way, I think Joshua Palmer is a pretty solid, trustable option here because of the Keenan Allen and Mike Williams injury factor. He's more of a trust if you must level than Gerald Everett. As long as he is active, he is a tight end that I would be interested in playing. Of course, on the Kansas City side of the ball, obviously you're trusting Mahomes, you're trusting Travis Kelsey. As far as the running backs are concerned, you cannot trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a starting option. Still fine to have on your roster. Isaiah Pacheco is kind of an if you must running back option. Still don't feel great about any of the running backs necessarily, just because they do utilize them in kind of like random ways. Jarek McKinnon would be more of a very deep league if you must option, but still would rather avoid the backfield in Kansas City if I can help it. And then the pass catchers, it really comes down to the health of Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, even McCall Hardman. And then Kadarius Toney would be the healthiest one of the bunch right now, and even Sky Moore. Maybe he can make an appearance in this one. So definitely, Kadarius Toney is a trust to if you must option, more of a flex play, really just dependent on the health and availability of Juju Smith-Schuster. He would be the priority to get into lineups over someone like Mecole Hardman or Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Just a little bit too up and down in their involvement and their production on the team. So I hope that made sense for you. Monday Night Football got the San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, unsure if Kyler Murray is going to be starting. Don't love that for the entire offense. If Colt McCoy is the starter, um, everyone just sort of gets a little bit of a downgrade as a unit, but still trustworthy players are James Conner in this one, just with no Eno Benjamin around again, just kind of a perplexing move by the Cardinals. But either way, James Conner is trustworthy. DeAndre Hopkins is trustworthy, and then Trey McBride, the rookie tight end, who now has to step up in Zach Ertz's absence. He is out for the season, so that's a shame. Very trustworthy tight end option done for the year. Hate to see that, especially as a former Eagle. Oh, I'm always wishing him well. So Trey McBride, very um, big time rookie prospect. So very excited to see him be implemented into this offense now. Again, a little bit of expectation management just with Colt McCoy most likely starting. And it can just take a little bit of time here for the rookie tight ends to get assimilated into the NFL game. But I believe he was the Mackey Award winner, the top tight end in college football last season. So, he definitely has a great amount of pedigree. He was a high draft pick, so he's got it all. The good draft capital, the pedigree from college. So all the pieces for him to succeed are there. Maybe more of a long term thing. This week, not I'm not so sure, but moving forward, he's absolutely worth an ad, absolutely worth a stash in your redraft leagues. Obviously, he's already going to be rostered in should be rostered in every dynasty league that you're in. So interesting one, but definitely worthy to add, but maybe not quite ready to start just yet. Although with the teams on bye, I mean, it really wouldn't be crazy if you had to throw them into a couple of lineups here. On the San Francisco 49ers side of the ball, you're starting all your 49ers. Cardinals defense is definitely exposable. So Jimmy Garoppolo, Christian McCaffrey, even Elijah Mitchell would be more of a if you must option. All the pass catchers, as far as Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, trust them. George Kittle, he's just one of these guys you just have to start. You know it's been disappointing, but if I have him on my team, I have to just have him in my lineup and just hope for the best at this point. Very frustrating, but it's one of these things. He is just a phenomenal football player. It just doesn't always translate, or it hasn't always translated this season in the fantasy realm. But want him in my lineup if I have him. Just gotta. He's kind of like in that Kyle Pitts range where it's unfortunate if he's on your team and he just isn't succeeding in the way that or producing in the way that you would like, but hard to not get him into your starting lineup. So that would do it for the primetime games. Going to go through the 1 p.m. games now, or the early slate on Sunday, starting with my Philadelphia Eagles at the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts won their first game with the new head coach Jeff Saturday against the Raiders. That actually was really cool to see. Hopefully he snaps his win streak against the Eagles, and the Eagles get their mojo back. But on the Colts side of the ball, Matt Ryan did start. He was okay against the Raiders, and it was the Raiders, so not a tremendous defense. Um, Philadelphia would be a much harder matchup. So Matt Ryan would come in as a super flex play, but a bottom tier super flex play. Would not feel excited to get him into my super flex, but that's just it is what it is. With the four teams on bye, he would fit the bill there. Michael Pittman, definitely a trustworthy player. Expectations should be a little bit lower here against Philadelphia. Jonathan Taylor, as long as he's healthy, obviously you're going to be playing him. Uh, Teams have been running the ball decently well against the Eagles as of late. So obviously it's Jonathan Taylor. You're not shying away from him. Normally, this would have been a spot where I would have said, well, he's a good player, but Eagles are a good defense. I don't think it's quite at that level at this point. Um, so Taylor, of course. Alec Pierce is a rookie wide receiver who has had some interesting moments, interesting usage, but has been a little bit disappointing at this point. He would be more of a bust in this one. Not ready to get him into starting lineups until further notice. Just want to see how the Colts offense gels here with um, Jeff Saturday now in the mix. So fine to have on your roster. Not ready to start him though. On the Philadelphia Eagles side of the ball, still, I'm going to be confidently starting Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. No Dallas Goddard. He's going to be on IR for at least 4 weeks. So hopefully he gets back on the field soon. But the backup tight ends, Jack Stoll, not ready to throw him into a lineup just yet. Fine to add in like a really deep like dynasty league or really really deep like tight end premium redraft league. Um, but definitely the core four there. Hurts, Sanders, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. You can have a lot of confidence in this matchup. Next one will be the Chicago Bears at the Atlanta Falcons. On the Falcons side of the ball, Marcus Mariota is a trustworthy QB play more as a super flex and just hoping that he can capitalize on the rushing work. Cordero Patterson, another trustworthy running back option. Just hope he can get a little bit more volume compared to what we saw in the Thursday night game. Drake London is more of an if you must wide receiver option. May have to rely on him just with the players on bye. There's a lot of wide receivers that we rely on week in and week out on bye. So this might be a good opportunity to get Drake London into that starting spot. And then Kyle Pitts, the Kyle Pitts woos continue, but hard to not have him in your lineup. He's an if you must option just as a default at this point, unfortunately. Chicago Bears, David Montgomery gets a big boost up with Khalil Herbert on IR. Cole Kmet has been just as hot of a player as there is in fantasy football, as well as the quarterback Justin Fields. So really going to be very challenging to not get Cole Kmet into your starting lineup, even though the first 5 weeks of the season were just as awful as you could imagine. Then the last 4 weeks, I think, with a bye week in there, just has completely taken off. So that's been awesome to see, just in general, but especially for him, who had all the opportunity to do it, just hadn't been able to up until recently here. Then Justin Fields, my goodness, just absolutely scalding hot player right now. Have to start him, no matter what, especially against this Atlanta Falcons defense. It's just so juicy. Darnell Mooney, the wide receiver there. for the Bears. Definitely a trustworthy option, more of a flex play. Still want to see Chase Claypool come on a little bit more. Definitely rosterable, but definitely not a start worthy option. He would be a bust until further notice. So that'll do it for the Bears at the Falcons. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns at the Buffalo Bills. Not going to do the snow joke again, but because of all the snow, this kind of makes for a very messy situation for fantasy. Obviously, Josh Allen is a stud quarterback, but in these kind of snowy games, kind of gives you some pause on how much passing he can do. Obviously, he still has the rushing upside, but I don't think he's going to rush the ball like 20 times or whatever. So it's kind of a tricky one. I would elevate all of the running backs in this one. I would downgrade a lot of the pass catchers in this one, which is a shame because Amari Cooper on the Browns, um, David Njoku on the Browns, Donovan Peoples-Jones on the Browns. Not as thrilled to start them. I mean, we just got to watch like the weather reports there for Buffalo. But if it is actively snowing with a lot of snow, don't feel great about that. Nick Chubb, of course, skyrocketing him up. You can trust him. Kareem Hunt, who typically is like a flex play, he's real like if you must kind of borderline bust in this one. Don't feel great about it. Tough matchup also against the Bills. Um, yeah, he's just he just has become a very difficult one to trust at this point. So I would understand, but maybe because of the snow, because it's Buffalo, that it may just be for the best to for like Jacoby Brissett to just hand the ball off, mixing in Chubb and Hunt, but it just has been just so minimal the last couple of weeks. Further point about Jacoby Brissett, he would be a bust in this one, typically kind of like a bottom tier super flex play, not in this one. On the Buffalo side of the ball, Devin Singletary, I think, is a borderline trust if you must option. Had a big game last week. Had the 2 touchdowns. That was awesome. Can't always rely on that with how they utilize him and just with Josh Allen taking a lot of the red zone and goal line rushing work. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, typically players you can at least trust to borderline if you must. Uh, Outside of Diggs, I don't know if I'm going to really be trusting these guys this week. So it just depends on your roster, but just very much an if you must situation with those guys. New York Jets at the New England Patriots. On the Patriots side of the ball, quarterback Mac Jones comes in as a super flex play. Tough Jets defense, so just kind of have to minimize expectations there from the already sort of floor type of production that you get out of him. Ramondre Stevenson, confidently fire him up pretty much no matter what. Jacoby Myers, a wide receiver for the Patriots, I would see him as a trust option in this one. Again, a tough Jets secondary, especially with Sauce Gardner coming on. Still would trust him the most of the New England pass catchers. Anyone beyond those three, don't feel great about in this offense. So Hunter Henry, a guy who a tight end who I have traditionally really liked, is just getting inconsistent and low amount of usage. Don't love that. Then Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, like the sort of the secondary wide receivers after Jacoby Myers. Fine to have on rosters, but just not ready to have them in starting lineups, especially against a tough Jets defense. Zach Wilson on the Jets, the quarterback there, is a super flex play. Michael Carter and James Robinson are both sort of borderline if you must for this one. Be very interesting to see how James Robinson will continue to be implemented into the offense. Had a very good game before the bye week against the Bills, so that's very encouraging. Just sort of kind of I want to see a little bit more before I can start trusting him again. And then Michael Carter should have a pretty steady amount of pass catching work. But after the spy week that they just had, maybe it's more of a 50-50 split and the usage will be just kind of mixed. So kind of an interesting thing to think about here or monitor. But against the New England Patriots, you really don't love that matchup either way. Pass catchers, Garrett Wilson, Tyler Conklin are probably the most trustworthy of the bunch. Corey Davis is coming back from injury, so typically he had been kind of usable, more of an if you must to borderline bust. And then Elijah Moore still just trying to figure that one out. Tremendous player, just not not getting a lot of love there this season for whatever reason. Crazy, but hard to not have him as a rosterable player. Just can't start him. Moving on to Los Angeles Rams at the New Orleans Saints. The Saints did announce that Andy Dalton is starting as the quarterback once again, uh, which to me is still just kind of shocking. I just really want Jameis Winston in there. Jarvis Landry is back. Chris Olave is obviously still doing his thing, so you can trust Chris Olave. I think Jarvis Landry is more of a deeper league trust slash if you must, especially in PPR formats. Uh, Juwan Johnson is a tight end who's just has become kind of an interesting streamer, kind of fluky production here, but it has been like consistently fluky touchdown production. So hard to rely on that week in and week out, but it has just been happening. So definitely an interesting guy to add, kind of an if you must tight end play, as well as on the Saints, excuse me, Alvin Kamara can still continue to trust him, even though it has been a little bit up and down here the last few weeks. On the Los Angeles Rams side of the ball, looks like Matthew Stafford should be back in the lineup after having the week off. Again, he's more of a super flex play, especially with Cooper Cup out, which is just horrible for fantasy football and just for the game itself of football, and obviously for Cooper Cup, who just has been just a tremendous player over the last couple of seasons, especially last year, the Super Bowl MVP. So we hope he heals up quickly here for his own sake, especially interesting shifts in workload as far as the pass catchers go. Does Allen Robinson get a big boost? Does Van Jefferson get a big boost? Is it still going to be a lot of funnel to Tyler Higbee, who's the tight end there? Tyler Higbee will remain a trust option. I think Van Jefferson and Allen Robinson are if you must options. Um, and yeah, just want to kind of continue to monitor all of the other wide receivers behind them. As far as the running backs go, really difficult to trust any of these guys. Daryl Henderson did get a touchdown last week, but him and Cam Akers both only had 6 carries in the losing effort against the Cardinals. So really just can't start them unless you are just very, very desperate. You're not going to like it. You're not going to want to start them. But again, this may be a situation where if you're kind of decimated by injuries and bye weeks, I would prefer Daryl Henderson. Um, but keep an eye on Kyron Williams. He's the rookie out of Notre Dame. I did mention him last week. Kind of keep an eye on if if he gets like a lot of pass catching work, which he actually got a decent amount of last week. So from a PPR standpoint, not ready to start him yet, but definitely worth a roster spot. And just keep an eye on that because if he is kind of sneaky in the pass catching department, especially with Cooper Cup out, he may be a nice guy to take a look at down the stretch here. But don't want to get too hasty on that just yet. But just keep an eye out for Kyron Williams. Detroit Lions at the New York Giants. On the New York Giants side of the ball, Daniel Jones is a borderline QB1 to super flex play. Can definitely trust him against the Detroit Lions. Saquon Barkley, you're trusting. As far as the pass catchers go, really, Darius Slayton is a player who has been playing decently there in New York. More of a deeper flex play though, so very borderline if you must, week to week, hard to rely on him. Then Wandell Robinson, I hope he can start getting utilized in the offense a little bit more consistently. Hard to start him at this point unless you would just are truly, truly desperate, but I think you can look elsewhere. On the Lions side of the ball, Jared Goff is a borderline QB1 to super flex play, similar to Daniel Jones. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute trust here. As far as the pass catchers go, beyond him, don't really feel comfortable starting. any of those pass catchers. It just would have to be the deepest of leagues and a pretty desperate situation. As far as the running backs go, I think you can start Jamal Williams confidently just because of the amount of carries he's been getting, as DeAndre Swift is still not 100%. Then DeAndre Swift, it's hard to not start him just because of what he can do week in and week out, but he has been very limited in terms of his opportunities. So he becomes more of a deep league flex play, more of an if you must, where Jamal Williams has kind of taken over as the trustworthy, if you must, level running back. However, it is a tough matchup against the Giants. So limited expectations there. Really, the player I'm most excited about is Amon-Ra St. Brown, as is most weeks here. Carolina Panthers at the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens are coming back from the bye week, so we're very happy to have Lamar Jackson back. Um, Mark Andrews still unsure if he will be active in this one. If he's active, you're starting Mark Andrews, obviously the elite tight end. Isaiah Likely is kind of an interesting play here, regardless, because the uh, Ravens just don't have a super impressive pass catching group. Um, so, especially in Mark Andrews' absence, I would be firing up Isaiah Likely for sure. The running backs, it's kind of a mess. Don't really feel great about starting any of them, even though it is a very nice matchup against the Panthers. Gus Edwards would be tempting, even though he's questionable at this time. Still kind of battling some injuries there. If he's active, he would come in as an if you must. If he's inactive, I think Kenyon Drake would also come in as an if you must, but don't really feel great about either one of them, to be honest. And then Devin Duvernay, the wide receiver there, he would be probably the most appealing pass catching option in this offense as an if you must, sort of a deeper league if you must. Carolina Panthers side of the ball, it's looking like Baker Mayfield is going to be slated to start. Don't love the matchup against the Ravens, so he would be coming in as just a very borderline super flex play. Um, DJ Moore, uh, stud wide receiver, just has been disappointing as far as his target share and his output. Um, Hard to not get him into your lineup, but it would be understandable if you couldn't. He's more of an if you must for me. Terrace Marshall Jr. still is continuing to kind of come on in the offense. Not ready to start him though. And then as far as the running backs go, it's Donta Foreman. He's a trustworthy option here, but it is against the Ravens, so definitely want to downgrade the expectations just a hair. But from a volume standpoint, really rare to get the kind of carries that he's been getting week in and week out here since Christian McCaffrey was traded to the 49ers. Moving on to the Washington Commanders at the Houston Texans. On the Texans side of the ball, Davis Mills is just barely a super flex option, more of a bust option here. Damian Pierce is a trustworthy option. Hoping that Brandon Cooks is active. He's been a little bit up and down this year, mostly down. So he's comes in as an if you must wide receiver option, but any given week he can go for 100 and a touchdown. So it's just a matter of if and when that happens. Love him as a player, but has just been a little too inconsistent for me for fantasy football purposes. So very much an if you must deeper league flex play. Outside of that, probably just fine to hold him on your roster, but not really feel supremely confident starting him. Furthermore, with the backup running back situation, it'd be interesting to monitor what happens with Eno Benjamin, as I was discussing in the listener start sit questions. So just kind of get a handle on what Rex Burkhead is doing and what Eno Benjamin is doing in relief of Damian Pierce. Fine to have these guys rostered at this point, unless there is something much better on waivers, like with the other question as far as Eno is concerned, but definitely something to monitor. On the Washington side of the ball, coming off of the big win in Philadelphia against the Eagles, Taylor Heineke would be a super flex option. Just a very juicy matchup against the Texans here. I think you can confidently start Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson, as well as Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, and Logan Thomas are still kind of slowly working their way back into the offense and getting targeted and things like this. So fine to roster, but don't really want to get into your starting lineups at this point. But definitely a lot of good options there in the Washington offense against the Houston Texans. I'm just going to wrap up the show here, covering the later Sunday slate. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Denver Broncos. Broncos side of the ball, Russell Wilson sort of comes in as a super flex play. Cortland Sutton is an if you must wide receiver. Then Jerry Judy would be an if you must wide receiver if he is healthy. If he's not healthy, that definitely boosts up Cortland Sutton. KJ Hamler is out, so I think because of the questions with Judy and with Hamler, that can bump up Greg Dulcich as well, but more of an if you must tight end option. On the Raiders side of the ball, it's basically back to that core four that's been sort of a phrase I've been using here. It's Derek Carr, it's Josh Jacobs, it's Devontae Adams, and it's Foster Moreau. Those are the four that you can rely on. Foster Moreau is more of an if you must tight end play, as well as Derek Carr at this point. Still fine to have him, especially in a super flex league. Uh, Expectations should be managed, just going up against a tough Denver Broncos defense on the road. Dallas Cowboys at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings won that phenomenal game against the Bills, went all the way into overtime, and then naturally the Bills lose again in overtime. Just crazy. It's like who can stop this offense? Well, overtime can. So it's really unfortunate. But Dallas Cowboys at the Vikings here. I think you can trust a lot of players in this game. That this should be another very exciting matchup here for fantasy purposes. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys defense has been very good as a whole. Definitely looked a little bit exposable against the Packers last week. So if Kirk Cousins and company can continue to do that, I think this should be a very high scoring affair. Dallas side of the ball, you can trust Dak Prescott. You can obviously trust CD Lamb, Dalton Schultz, Tony Pollard. Keep your eye on Ezekiel Elliott. I think either way, he at best would be an if you must running back option here, but still fire up the core four of Dak, CD, Tony Pollard, and Dalton Schultz. Keep an eye on Michael Gallup. Still a good player, just has not been implemented as much as we'd like, and he's been kind of dealing with some injuries as well. But definitely the core four there in Dallas. Minnesota side of the ball, Kirk Cousins, TJ Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, obviously, Adam Thielen, all these guys you can feel pretty confident in going up against the Cowboys. Last matchup for week 11, we got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Really glad to have the Bengals back from the bye. So you're gonna be very confident in firing up Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Hayden Hurst against the Steelers. On the Steelers side of the ball, Kenny Pickett would be more of a bust option for me in this one. Not quite a super flex play, similar to Davis Mills. Going up against the Commanders, kind of in that tier. Um, Although much better weapons. So, it's one of those things. Pittsburgh, Najee Harris is a trust. Still got to play Najee if I have him. Jalen Warren, that there was some discussion of him like being utilized more in the offense. I was kind of more in a I'll believe it when I see it kind of a position. And last week he had very good usage. He had 9 carries. I believe he had, I think, at least 5 catches against the Saints. So if he's getting, 12 to 14 touches a game, well, that's going to make him a flex play in most cases. So in this one, very much an if you must. Najee Harris would still be the trust. And then as far as the pass catchers go, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and Pat Fryermuth are all trust to if you must options. Fryermuth, definitely a trustable tight end option. And then Deontay Johnson, it's just really hard to not get him in your lineup, especially with the kind of targets he's getting. Just has not done it as far as the touchdowns go, so that's very frustrating. But George Pickens definitely getting utilized in the passing game and scored a rushing touchdown last week. Can't always rely on that, but that does happen every now and then. So definitely can borderline trust both Deontay and George Pickens against the Bengals. So that's going to do it for week 11. Went through all the matchups, went through the listener start sit questions. So, again, we just want to thank everyone for asking those and just reach out anytime. So, if you didn't get the shout out on the show this time, just feel free to reach out, tag me on Twitter at Fantasy Ladder. Usually we'll respond in a timely fashion. Just really here to help you out with your lineup setting decisions. That's really the main purpose of this show in season is to help you optimize your lineup decision making. So appreciate you listening and checking out the show. If you found this helpful, hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see the rest of the episodes of the Fantasy Ladder podcast, but also the great content that's put out on the IDP Guys Network. So thanks again for listening. Best of luck to you and keep climbing.